My name is Jonathan Newer, and I'd like to show you the basics of how network printing work. Seems like a pretty simple topic, but the question does come up a lot. I've seen it over the years. So let's start off with identifying the different components here in just a typical network setup. You've got, of course, your computer. This would be how the end user is printing. They would print from here most likely. You have your network where all the devices that are networked plug into. You have the Office branch server here in this example. This is typically where you would do some setup work for the printer. And then over here you have the physical printer itself. Some of the things I do see people have confusion with is just kind of how the difference between a print queue and the physical printer. And so I just wanted to kind of go over the basics, how that works. So initially you do set up a print queue, what's known as a print queue on the branch server typically. And it's just, the setup is just basically a wizard. You go through and kind of choose next. Some of the important things to note is you do set an IP address for the print queue on this, so it can talk to the actual printer itself. And the other thing to note that's good to keep in mind is the print driver itself. Depending on, you kind of have to match that with the printer. Usually if it's like an HP or something, it'll be like an HP universal driver, just as a good little thing to note there. And of course, you also share the printer, the print queue as well. And that is how people can actually utilize the print queue on the branch server. If it wasn't shared, they wouldn't be able to see it. So anyway, just kind of how it would initially start out. You would go in, set up the print queue, just like I've stated with the wizard. Once that's set up, for this example, it's sales printer 1, and I gave it an IP address of 10.1.1.25. And from the end user standpoint, an easy way to map the printer, or basically add it from the branch server to the computer, is using a UNC path. So in this case, whack server A, which is the name of the server, sales printer 1, which is the name of the print queue. If you type that in a run line, typically you can just map it that way. Or a simple way for end users, you could email them a link, for example, and then they could click on the link. Sometimes you have to control click, and then it should automatically add it into their printers as well. So some of the things I do see with this setup that people get confused by is the idea of a print queue versus a physical printer. They're kind of like their own separate entities. Sometimes people think about them the exact same. When you think about a print queue, that's a software thing. It's just kind of a logical point that end users access to actually print. The actual printing work is done by the physical printer itself. So one thing sometimes I've seen in the past is people will go to the print queue, look at the IP address of the print queue, and they can't figure out maybe why it's printing. Like the print jobs are stacking up in there and they don't really get it. A lot of times then we would ask then for them to print out a print configuration off of the physical printer itself, so that way you can verify what the actual physical printer itself thinks its IP address is. There's also other things on there that tell you information that sometimes can be useful for troubleshooting that. Perhaps the MAC isn't quite, the MAC address, the hardware address of the physical NIC on the printer may not be what is set in a reservation for the IP address of this on the branch server. And so every time the printer reboots, the IP address changes, and now you have a scenario where this print queue says one thing, but this printer has a different IP address, in which case the user goes to print to this print queue here, and the jobs get stuck because the print queue doesn't know where to send them. And so that is the basics of how to do network printing. Thanks.